What transpired between her parents deciding to migrate from Zimbabwe and the day she specifically arrived into this country is something she is yet to fully understand. From her perspective, one random day early this century, she flew to the United Kingdom to rendezvous with her family, who had already one by one made their way to the infamous West. Her life from then became a steady stream of cities and schools and so many people. 10 years feels like hours, and the next thing she knows, she has just moved across the country to her 8th house, reluctantly starting at her 7th school. On day 1, it was rumoured her name was Sharkeisha. Inventive, she laughed to herself, thinking about how they would react when they realised she's in fact named after their grandmothers instead. At this point, she'd already recognised the unnaturally relaxed aspect of her personality. Later, she would decide that this was one of many subtle forces that floated under one word: suppression. Her dad wanted her to be a lawyer. Something about the way she justified any situation, seeing it in countless perspectives. It's a career she considered, or rather explored in a series of short daydreams. She imagined herself defending minorities, fighting for justice, pacing around the courtroom with the conviction of Annalise Keating and the style of Olivia Pope, knowing that realistically she would never star in front of a jury. Nevertheless, she carried this talent close to her, letting it define her actions. It would be that skill of justification and perception that would prove to cloud her everyday judgment. Excluding a younger version of herself, possibly in year 7, who she would infrequently spot through the cracks between crowds of white faces, she was the only black girl in this school. The saddest thing about this is that it did not concern her, not at this point. She was used to this. She had a trail of schools behind her where this was the case. Don't fear, new school, new science class, new best friend. The funny black girl is here to show you things you've never seen before. She knew all the tricks at this point. She knew what would make them laugh, listen, engage. She knew if she started swinging her hips at a party, it was enough to make the most feared girl scream with elation and fumble on her phone to take a video for her Snapchat story. Look guys, I'm at a party so cool. There's black girls doing things you only see on TV. She wonders how her entire being would differ if even half or a quarter of the percentage of people she crossed paths with were black, were like her. What difference would that make to her outlook, the way she thinks and interacts? She even knew what to do to win their parents over. Uneasy they would be at first, wary of the unknown, guilty that they felt this way, surprised that their postcard street is upgrading, adding new colours. It was simple though really, she just had to do what was expected of her at home. Once she would finish a drink, she'd wash up the glass, calmly waiting for the response her past research was positive she would receive. After their mothers realised the small actions she had completed, they would gush and exclaim about how well-mannered and polite of a young girl she was. They were surprised. She didn't quite like doing this though. She felt pity radiated towards her here, as if they thought her innate action to clean up resembled actions of the last black children they saw, poverty-stricken and modelling for water aid. In the place she previously dwelt, somebody's father commented that she was the blackest person he has ever seen in flesh. She found that funny. Sounds like an achievement. It was her nonchalant attitude that really reeled them in. Once they realised, they could ask every question they wished to know about somebody who looked like her, and who would know the answer, and who would greet them with a calm smile and a giggle before an elaborative and considerate response. They would be begging her to be a guest in their house. The mothers were excited they got to experience the touch of her hair and the stroke of the smoothest skin they'd ever felt. The fathers were amused with how well-spoken she was, and intelligent. Together they were proud to be the envy of all their friends who did not have access to this version of exotic. Together they were excited that they had someone to make them appear less ignorant than they felt. One woman could not grasp the fact that Africa was a continent, but swooned over the attractiveness of black babies. She handled both conversations with absolute serenity. Her parents, on the other hand, were wise people, only ever moving to catchment areas of good schools. That's all they ever cared about, properly educating their children. They knew that opportunities are often where the white resides, and as a result, she was navigated from small towns to small villages, her parents having no issue severing all the budding relationships she would begin to form at new schools before moving her to a different one. It happened a lot as a child, leaving the first part of her youth blurred and confused. When she joined a new place, she was not just the new girl, she was the first girl, first black girl. She was so alien, different, unfamiliar, and she felt this. She did not doubt the value of her existence, she just felt the uncertainty emitted towards her. So as a defense, a numbness developed that helped her not feel like a monkey in a zoo to her new audience. She became her own best friend and would step into new situations with nothing but intrigue, predicting how this stop on her journey would impact the next. Each new place she would land, her parents would remind her daily of her difference to these people in every way, shape and form, in how she is and the importance of her actions. Despite their desire to be in suburban areas, her parents were still strict about their children never becoming like them or never believing they ever could be. So as a result, she felt like an undercover agent whose role was to blend in, stay cool, never forget what she came here to do. She would spend several hours a day interacting and trying to relate with people who had zero sections in their brain which could understand who she really was. In combination with a number of places she would survey like this, collecting discrimination on the way, she was engulfed with a suppression of her identity. But to her surprise, there was an era where the undercover agent became native. In the midst of party attending, society defying and adolescent living, she was swallowed into a 3-year-long teen movie where her friendship group were the main characters. During this time, when her parents would say something like, "Ukango peda chikoro, banokusiya. Once you finish school, they will leave you behind," she would kiss her teeth. What she would soon discover is that the stellar perception she was confident she possessed briefly became hope, trust and naivety in disguise. Naivety through the rejection of her parents' life lessons, hope that nobody dwelled on her skin colour but the qualities behind it, trust that this was indeed the case. Apparently, the suppressed emotions she had collected from her journey so far had now formed into a want to just belong. Perhaps when she was 7, the bully in her class who would taunt her synthetic hair, pressuring her to wear it down when it was in cornrows, had impacted her more than she had initially thought. She always did cringe when she thought back to how excited she was to approach him after the break, with braids this time. As expected, she struck an age where things began to feel different. There was no defining moment of betrayal that would help describe the beginning of the end, only a collection of small occurrences that reminded her that being a black woman requires extra effort. She couldn't just float through her academics, choosing random subjects and expecting everything to be okay like her peers. She couldn't just throw her school stuff on the floor, run upstairs and await the call for dinner, or wake up on a Saturday, stroll downstairs for breakfast, get ready and leave the house. It becomes interesting when 4 people get together, 3 of them having the morning just described, whilst the other was awoken at 7 a.m. The other thoroughly cleaned her house top to bottom, the other cooked breakfast for the family and prepared the meat for the dinner later on. The other would have nobody to share her morning with, to relate with and laugh about the likeliness of the angry mothers and the laziness of their judgmental fathers. She realised that in the end her best friend was still herself. It was an easy slip into a blasé mindset regarding her colour. She was alone in a black bubble, hiding the feelings it brought her. And from here, she launched several discussions of herself that brought forth a new reality. She began constantly noticing differences between herself and neighbours. Seeing a group of white girls and one black girl walking together, it felt like an out-of-body experience. The difference between the girl who looked like her and the others was something she needed to see. She had not forgotten she was black. She had forgotten how substantially it mattered. She revisited conversations with her parents, finding flaws beside their valid points. She cut all her hair off and never used fake hair again. She told herself that she must work 10 times harder than everybody around her to get to the same place, and vowed to tell her children the same. She forced herself to awaken. The fantasy was over, and she would not change a thing, or the people she met. She now sees that her purpose was to sprinkle some heritage in what would otherwise be a virgin area. Suburban mothers with answered questions is a step to a future, and therefore something she's proud of. All that is left is for her to project her identity as far as the universe will allow.